Chris always makes sure to keep every interaction smooth. But there have been times when the man simply lost it, and this weirdo right here did something so crazy that Chris was having none of it.
And who knows? Who knows what? We can do it if it clicks.
No. Well, yeah.
I haven't even gotten to the main part of the episode, and I already know where this is heading. According to this creepo's chats, he wanted to do a lot of things with the and he pretty much generalized it by saying that he wanted to her. But little did he know that the only game he'll be playing is with the cops, and boy are they waiting for you with open arms. And he was here to give the girl he was meeting some much needed training in life skills. At least that's what he felt. But let's talk about the girl in question for a bit. I mean, just look at her, so calm and composed. I know she's an actor who's just pretending to be this naive girl, but even so, these weirdos are very real, and it takes guts to actually stand there and face them despite knowing all the running through their heads. When this sicko arrived, the girl tried her best to make the moron comfortable, and by the looks of it, he truly enjoyed all the attention. When things started to go the way he wanted, Eugene got into the main stuff. Now, listen to him real close.
Try to get you excited.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Have you done that kind of stuff before?
Sure.
I just love this guy's confidence. Just look at him going on. What was he thinking? That he was the only physical trainer that she ever needed in her life? But this sicko made sure to clear things up. He said that this time he wasn't gonna go all the way. He was someone who liked to go slow and steady. As for now, he only wanted to get her excited, and apparently he knew exactly what to do. By the looks of it, this weirdo is in for the long run. He didn't want to be over and done in a day. He wanted to keep coming back so he could keep teaching her some new tricks of the trade. Now, I've been covering a ton of these guys on my channel, but not many have asked the girl who was willing to go through with it. Maybe it was just the reassurance he needed to satisfy his own pride. Something like, damn, I'm so cool that a girl doesn't mind hooking up with me kind of vibe. But out of nowhere, the man admitted something really big.
I'm more scared than you are, to be honest.
What are you scared of?
Yep, Eugene was actually scared of the consequences. He knew he shouldn't be here, and yet he simply couldn't hold himself back from coming. So basically, this is exactly why he was being so careful. What if he had to bail out right in the middle of the act? It was better to take his own time, win the confidence of the girl, and then get into the real deal. In fact, during the conversation, this bozo actually blurted out that he didn't even think the girl was real until he met her. Damn right, man, she isn't actually. But Eugene had to find out the hard way.
That's your father?
How you doing?
Okay. This the police?
What's going on?
Sadly, Chris had to interrupt a beautiful evening by the beach and screw up Eugene's life forever. As usual, Chris wasted no time and got right into business. And how did this weirdo act?
I knew this was a setup, so I told it was the police. That's what
All his fears had just come alive. He had his doubts all through the way, and even during the conversation with the girl. But it's a different thing when you're actually caught red-handed. Eugene immediately tensed up. He started pacing around out of restlessness and got so frantic that all he wanted to do was to scoot off. But before that, he had to make his stance clear. He kept insisting that he wasn't here to do anything, and that's exactly what he told the girl as well. But did he forget that he was the one who proposed the baby steps that they would take together towards Wonderland? Somehow I find that most weirdos suddenly suffer from a short-term memory loss as soon as they get caught. Want to see more proof? Watch this.
How old are you?
43.
43.
I mean, sorry, 53, sorry.
53.
53, I'm sorry.
Now you said 49.
You see what I mean? He even messed up his freaking age. Between 43, 53, 49, how old was this guy really? Chris was on the verge of flipping out, cause how much can you lie at the end of the day? The TV presenter then started to read the chat logs aloud, and what you're about to hear next is simply disgusting.
Believe it, I knew.
You talk about her being the you never had.
Oh no, he didn't. How can you even talk like that? How can you have the heart to actually call someone your daughter and then walk right into her arms? Jeez, there is no more decency left in this world. Chris is normally a very calm and composed person. No matter how much some of these sickos trigger him, he tries to keep his cool. But there was something about this interaction that was pissing him off. I mean, he actually said she could be his daughter. What kind of person talks like that? When the weirdo kept throwing his hands up and repeating that he knew it was all a setup, Chris lost it.
And I kept on
Then
saying
why
to
did you do it? Help me to
myself,
understand.
I don't know.
Eugene was having a panic attack, but Chris didn't want to let him go as of yet. There was another important issue that he had to bring up, and Chris was not gonna let him go before he asked him this.
Talk in the chat about you can only come over a half hour because you got to pick up your wife.
I wasn't gonna. I was saying.
Where's your wife?
Had it been for me, I would have just pushed him into the water. I mean, he actually kept his wife waiting at work, and this is what he was up to while she struggled for the family? Is this man even real? At this point, there was nothing much left to talk about, and it was time to hand over this loser to the right people.
As he leaves the beach, police come running towards him.
Down.
Eugene was immediately transported to the nearest interrogation center, where he pleaded guilty to attempt a vile act on a For all the drama that he staged, Eugene received lifetime parole supervision and a lifetime on the offender's registry. But how did this guy escape jail time? Well, don't worry, because sometime later, Eugene was arrested again for violating the conditions of his parole, and this time, he got what he truly deserved. He was out behind bars for 12 whole months. But this next weirdo said something so absurd that it drove Chris nuts. And I mean bonkers. Okay, fair warning, but the moment I saw this guy, I felt like knocking him out of his senses. Can anyone be so disgusting? The man I'm talking about is Corey Edgar, a 32-year-old jerk whose screen name was just as vile as him. So this weirdo, who went by the screen name Rick's Talented Tongue, approached a girl online and, without wasting any time, got into the crux of the matter. Well, of course he had his own doubts and suspected it was some kind of undercover operation. But hey, how could he hold himself back from hitting up this girl? The man was more than eager to share a few pictures of his big guy with the girl. And what's more, he even asked her if she could help him put his equipment to good use. From there, the chat gets even more graphic, so much that I can't even share a gist of it here. However, the man was fully aware what he was doing would land him in trouble, and so hatched a plan. He threw a fit about how he would never approach anyone, and then even threatened to report the girl to the police for trying to entice him. He even sent a pretty harsh message that screamed out, "Leave me alone!" For a few seconds there, I thought, okay, maybe this guy was genuine, and maybe he was serious. Even if he wasn't, none of the crew members expected him to show up again. He was a done deal, and they'd probably have to look for another catch. But Corey decided to pop up again. He was back, and this time he wanted proof before he continued his conversation. Proof of what? Proof of the girl being real, and proof of the girl being really young. Could the crew disappoint him? Of course not. They set up a phone call, and it looks like Corey took the bait.
Nobody's here. My parents are gone.
Was that enough to convince him? A few hours later, Corey showed up at the Sting house, and although he was eager to invite himself inside, there was something that was still holding him back.
Where are you going?
This weirdo had already made it this far, but he couldn't make up his mind if he should actually go through with the plan or just take off. He was so suspicious that he didn't even step inside the house, but instead kept weighing his options, standing right at the door. Well, make up your mind already. We don't have all day, plus who knows? There may be another weirdo just like you lurking in the corner somewhere. Finally, after giving it a long thought, Corey entered the house, and the first thing he did was to scan the entire place down. Now, I've seen some really suspicious men before, but this guy was FBI. I mean, he wasn't convinced till he scanned the hell out of the place. And just then, he spotted the camera crew, and
You
bang!
are a suspicious guy, Rick.
I told you there's people here.
Wait up, Corey, where did you think you're running off to? Corey had already done his bit of investigation, and now it was time for Chris to do his part. But Corey wasn't planning to give Chris the chance to. He wanted to bounce, and he wanted to bounce that very second. When Chris realized Corey might just escape, he changed the tone of his voice, and guess what? It worked! Have you ever seen Chris being so stern? Take a look at how the TV presenter commanded the loser to walk right back
I
in.
want to hear the whole story. So come on over here and have a seat.
Corey was well aware that his life was over. He kept repeating the same big thing over and over again like a broken record. Whether he stepped out of the house or inside, either way, he was done. But there was much that had to be discussed, and Chris wasn't letting him go anywhere before that. It was time to set things straight, but the only thing that Corey could say was this.
I did not want this to happen.
Chris wasn't here for the BS. He never is. All he wanted was a confession, and perhaps an apology apology for some of the actions committed by the weirdos like Corey. As for the excuses and all the drama that takes place, Chris couldn't care less about it. There were enough guys waiting right outside the house to take care of, but when Chris started to read from the transcripts, Corey started to act like a saint. He tried to explain how he too asked to be left alone and suspected that this whole thing was a setup. But the only thing that this did was to annoy Chris even further, and just when he think Corey might back down a bit, he grew impatient, and this ticked Chris off in the wrong way.
Then you show
You're
some
arresting me
reservations.
and everything.
I'm
My
not
fault, too.
arresting you.
Well, it looks like Corey already knew of the plan ahead. Whining and stomping his feet around had made no difference to his situation. But since he already knew he was going down, he decided to clean his name as much as possible. And so, he started this whole rant about how the girl kept luring him into meeting her, despite him not showing the interest to. But wait, wasn't he the only one who shared some really obscene pictures with the girl? There was no escaping that now. And so Corey decided to just be out with it. And he admitted to sharing the pictures. I mean, he had to, but he said that they weren't his. Then what was the fun in sharing it anyway? Come on, be a grown-arse man already. Just accept your faults and get going on your way. But Corey decided to play victim. He blamed the girl and outrightly said that he was innocent and was being played all throughout. When Chris heard this statement, he lost it.
It's not my fault. It's not her fault.
Not your fault, Rick. You kept going with the conversation.
When Corey understood there was no way out of this, he started this whole story about how he was going fishing and just happened to stop by. And look where he was, being grilled for no mistake of his. But can you believe this man? Of course not. Well, he was fishing, but not for the right thing. When Chris revealed his true identity, Corey pretty much laid out what his future was gonna look like when he said this.
My family's done. They're waiting to arrest me. They're waiting to take me to jail.
And yes, he was right. The cops were waiting for him to step out of the house, but Corey wasn't in a mood to leave. He wanted to stall his arrest as much as possible, which is when Chris had to remind him of something important.
Maybe another good reason to go outside. But Rick, it's not going to help you to stay here any longer.
But Corey paid no heed to any of that. He shamelessly went ahead and poured himself a glass of the drink while Chris and the rest of the crew waited for him to have his fill. The nerve on this man, taking his own sweet time and chilling while the cops were waiting for him just outside. Had it been for me, I would have cuffed him right there. Why even wait till he left the house? But there were rules to be followed, and Chris had to this time sternly ask him to leave because this man was showing no signs of doing so. It looked like he was even ready to take a nap right there, but not this time. With no other option in sight, Corey left the house and readily surrendered to the cops.
Put your hands on your head.
Well, that was one hell of a weird encounter, but this next weirdo goes down as one of the strangest men Chris has ever met.
Making a mistake. Making a mistake.
Marvin Lakin was made of something else. He is like no other weirdo you have ever seen on the show. It's safe to say that this dude's brain was wired differently. How differently, really? You're about to find out. Most of the morons who show up at the Sting House usually come in to have one hell of a night and then leave. That's it. It's just a one-time thing. Once they were done with it, they simply moved on to the next. But Marvin had some other plans. He didn't want to be just another Tom, Dick, and Harry. He wanted to make a point. He wanted to prove that there was nobody in the world like him, and for this, he had to make sure that the girl he was meeting would never forget him. Marvin put his plan to work the day he struck a conversation with one of the members of the crew online. He started off with sharing some really explicit content, which ideally would have driven any innocent Hey, yes, his imagination was that crazy. But Marvin was not done yet. He went into great detail of how he wanted to try out different in different rooms of the house. And what was the reason behind this? So the girl would remember him no matter which room she was in. He wanted to fill all the rooms of the house with the aroma of their sizzling chemistry. But did he have it in him? Meanwhile, the girl played along and nurtured all of his fantasies. But she had a request to make as well. Marvin would be allowed to do as he pleased, if and only if he did just one thing: walk into the house with nothing on. The crew assumed it was too much to ask, because what kind of crazy man would agree to something as insane as this? They expected him to put an end to the conversation and head off in the opposite direction. But Marvin surprised everyone, or rather should I say shocked, because this is how he appeared at the Sting House.
Where are you?
Why just take a seat?
Now that's just vile. This man was ready to do anything just to get steamy and hot with a He couldn't wait any longer now that he was here and started to walk towards the voice of the girl. But then the door opened. Somebody else happened to tower over him.
You want to explain yourself? Grab me that towel right there, please.
Chris was in a deep state of shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could anyone actually be so desperate? And to make things worse, Marvin actually admitted that something else would have happened if Chris hadn't ruined his plans. But when Marvin tried to explain that he wouldn't have gone all the way, Chris lost it.
I wasn't going. You went all the way when you took your clothes off.
What's even worse is that Marvin wanted the girl to perform a few disgusting acts on a freaking cat. With this guy, Chris was over and done with him even before he got into the details of the chat logs. Someone as vile as Marvin didn't deserve any more time from the crew. It was better to pack him off, as just sharing the room with him was making life insufferable. Chris deserves a Nobel Prize for handling maniacs like these. But his job is far from over, because who knows? Maybe there are more weirdos out there just waiting for the right time to show up sometime soon. But this guy right here blurted out one of the hardest confessions ever heard on the show. And what he said is not only embarrassing, but also upsetting.
Come in. How was the drive?
Walking up the driveway here is our next loser for today, James Cisneros. And this guy's chat logs were absolutely disgusting. But do you think it's just about the chat logs? This man is crazier than you think. This bozo literally asked the girl if she could sneak out of the house, hitch a ride with him to a motel room, and then sneak right back in, all in a jiffy. But here comes the most shocking part. This dude pitched this idea knowing very well that the girl's mom was still at home. The nerve on this man! Can anyone be this desperate? And not to forget that he was expecting all this from someone who was clearly very young. This weirdo had a ton of ideas on his mind, and since the girl didn't agree to step out, he decided to step in.
So I made a drink. I don't know if you want to try it or not. It's Kool-Aid.
Well, this is the same man who had earlier in the chats had gone to great lengths to find out more about the girl's experience and her liking, how she liked it, where she liked it, and things like that. The man, whose screen name was way too graphic to be shared, had come prepared with whatever he needed to see him throughout the day. But what he ever so confidently whips out of his pocket leaves the entire crew stunned.
Where you want to place? Where you want to just anywhere?
Yep, this sicko had actually brought along a whole bunch of skins. You see, protection is of key importance, but guess what's even more important? To consider the age of the person you'd be using it with. You know what, James? Just shove that thing right back into your pants for now, and your Big Joe as well. Because there's no way either of them would be put to good use today, especially since this is what happened next.
Please have a seat.
What?
Have a seat. I'm Chris Hansen.
So where's all the confidence gone now, huh? When Chris brought up the online chats, this bozo started to deny all of it. Guess he didn't know Chris actually had the transcripts on him. But who are you trying to fool anyway? When the whole matter of the girl's age was brought up, James pulled off his first ever audition into Hollywood. But guess what? His acting sucked big time. Although he kept insisting that the girl never mentioned her age, his eyes had already given it away. The man was dying inside. But when Chris pulled out the transcripts, the weirdo did something unexpected. Did he just say bye before walking out? Well, it's gonna be a bye for sure, but at least wait for Chris to finish his iconic reveal. Maybe another time. As for now, James was so embarrassed that he could not stand in the midst of Chris anymore. And as soon as he left the house, this is what happens. Well, that had to happen someday. But before moving on to the next weirdo, let me show you a clip of James, which might be one of the most honest confessions I've ever heard on the show. While the cops were interrogating him, James admitted to the hardest truth ever when he said this.
You don't think about the age. You just think about doing it.
That pretty much sums up the thought process of every idiot who shows up at the Sting House. But this next weirdo was so pathetic that you just have to look at him once to get annoyed. But what he said was even more weird.
And what's your last name?
I don't have a last name.
This guy right here is Brian Gosselin. And don't tell me his appearance doesn't send chills down your spine. There's something about that hair, dude. It just screams out trouble. The more I look at him, the more I'm convinced that this bozo was definitely BS. Well, I know I wouldn't want to be around someone like this, but I'm more than glad that he got hooked onto the crew's elaborate plan to catch weirdos like him. When the mudhead entered the house, he thought he'd hit the jackpot. The man hadn't even met the girl yet, and he was already sizing up the place.
Kidding when you said a big house.
I know, the house is beautiful. I love my house.
Yeah.
Well, this guy was smitten. He obviously felt lucky to hook up with the girl, but how about doing it in a house as lavish as this? Now that's one hell of a treat he'd not even asked for. Now this loser was probably thinking of sketching a bigger plan, like not just leave it to a one-time thing, and probably this is why he asked this.
Oh, did you bring protection?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sort of getting annoyed with the way he replies every time, so let me just cut the crap and head into the biggest confrontation ever.
Bad news about that is you're probably not going to need that type of protection tonight.
Ta-da! Enter Chris. But Mr. Weirdo wasn't the least bit bothered. Apparently, he knew it was a setup. So why did you even come, huh? To get arrested? Or to just get your 5 minutes of fame on TV? But you know what? His eyes spoke volumes. Take a look at this next interaction between him and Chris and tell me what you think.
I know what's your last name.
I don't have a last name.
You don't have a last name.
Damn, this guy is the perfect vision of a demon. What else do you think made him speak to the girl like the way he did in the chats? This loser definitely had some psychological triggers. Apparently, when the girl acted up like she lost interest in him during the chats, the man turned aggressive. Not only that, he had the most strange way to woo a girl. While most men promise stars and castles, this one said he'd eat dog poop just to please her. Well, you don't have to eat it, my man. You already look like it, you skunk. I'm sure Chris had a ton of questions for this guy, but this piece of trash decided to bail out. But you know he's not going to get far, right? Brian was picked up by the cops waiting for him right outside the door. Yeah. And although I would have wanted him to stay behind bars for longer, this sicko got away because the production crew couldn't hand over enough evidence in time for the hearing, and that's embarrassing. But this next bozo might look really dumb, but don't go by his looks, because this one actually did something that was thought to be impossible.
6 feet of you, 8 feet of you.
This tiny little man running towards the Sting house is Michael Sabert, and look at that excitement on his face. Woohoo! Someone's looking forward to a really steamy night. While most men walk towards the house, this one was in some kind of a rush. He literally sprinted towards the entrance. But little did he know that all of his plans would be dashed in just a few minutes. Right off the bat, as soon as he entered the house, this weirdo rushed to the bathroom. Well, no wonder he was in a hurry, but before he could even get there and relieve himself, Chris walked right in.
Come on over here for a minute, please.
Huh? Oops? What do you mean, oops, you pea-brain? From there on, Michael came across as someone who had just been struck with lightning and the purest form of wisdom. He said that he was very well aware of what he'd done, and also went on to promise that he'd never ever do it again. For some reason, Chris didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on this guy. Or maybe another jerk was lined up right behind this one, and they had to clear the way out for him. Either way, Chris dismissed him way earlier than you'd think he would. And just as you'd expect, this sicko, who apparently suffered seizures from a near-fatal fall he had in his childhood, was picked up by the cops. It's sad to see that he'd already gone through so much in his life, but this kind of attitude is just not acceptable. On further investigation, Michael was found guilty and sentenced to 18 months in prison, but nobody had a clue that the man had no plans of adhering to his sentence. Forget about the sentence. 8 months later, Michael broke the promise he made to Chris. He resurfaced on the chat once again. I've seen a ton of men who go to the extent of even changing their names after getting caught in a sting operation as public as this, but Michael didn't give a damn. He was back to chatting with girls, looking for a date, all while still using the same screen name as before. Although he was a little cautious this time around, he wasn't gonna get away with it anyway. For some reason, this dude thought it was okay to brag about how he got caught earlier, and even brought it up during the chat. The two anyway end up picking up a day for their rendezvous, but this sicko had to give it a pass because he had a court hearing to attend. Yep, it was the same hearing from the Riverside sting he was caught in 8 months earlier. The very next day, Michael was at the Sting house. Another day, another setup, another girl, but the same old disgusting man. Michael entered the house with a hell of a lot of enthusiasm and excitement, but once inside, Chris decided to say hello.
You know, you look familiar to me.
Oops.
Oops, you've done it again. Like I said, same intention and the same reaction, same TV show, and the same 6-foot-tall man's interruption. But this time around, hopefully there's no escaping. But Michael knew the drill. He just threw his hands up and promised to not do it again. Once again. But it's not that simple now, is it? So Michael decided to complicate things. There's the drama you're all looking for. It looks like this guy had a really crazy turn on. He probably got aroused when he got caught. Why else do you think he'd be here time and again just just to get caught, or was he just so dumb that he couldn't figure it out? Either way, that's just embarrassing. Getting caught twice in a row, and that too when your hearing is still in progress? Michael was apparently also charged with going after someone with a bat. Ew, that's crazy. Well, the crew was just lucky enough to nab this guy once again. But who knows? There may be more weirder people out there who might show up at the Sting House once again in the future.